Hey you guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Allie Wilkins. If it is your first time here, welcome to the channel. I'm so excited that you're here. And if you're new to me, like I said, I'm Allie and I'm an Akashic Records facilitator. I'm a priestess. I work as a seer. So really all of my work is devoted to bringing the ancient feminine wisdom back into our modern day world. And that's very much aligned with what our video is about today. So today we're going to be talking about the fall of the priestess, and it's so challenging to do this video justice. I've actually tried to make it 3 times and I'm like, no, this doesn't describe truly what happened. And there's so many aspects of this that we'll never know, because a lot of this has been hidden and deleted from history and twisted and manipulated, just like when we learned about history. For example, when we learned about what happened to the Native Americans in the US, our history books twist things. I was actually just traveling, and I believe we were driving through northern Georgia, and we went to this rest area, and there was this plaque about the Trail of Tears. And the way that it was described, it said most of these Native Americans came without force. And I was talking with them about how this isn't probably true. Yeah, if somebody has weapons to their head, they're not going to go with force. So anyways, the way that we've learned things isn't necessarily the truth of what happened. And so this is a shift that I've been very personally interested in and have felt this strange sort of I need to figure this out. I need to learn more about this. And so for the last couple years, I've been really obsessed, to be honest. I've been very obsessed with what happened that shifted us into a patriarchy. And so I have several masterclasses on my website that I've done that are free that you can download. If you want to learn more specifically about the shift from matriarchy to patriarchy, I suggest watching the one called Return to Goddess. It really goes into what happened from 6,000 to 8,000 years ago as we shifted into the patriarchy that we exist in now. And I think that it's actually very important for us to understand what happened. It gives us clues about how we can shift things now. So what I want to really focus on today is the fall of the priestess. And I'm doing a course called The Priestess Returns, where we're going to be going into this in a much deeper level. But here I just want to bring forward some of the things that happened and some of the ways that we're still being affected by this today. So I want to just showcase, this is a very easy way of showcasing this. So actually, let me back up a second. So a priestess is essentially a representative of the goddess on earth, someone who devotes herself to the goddess, to feminine energy. And this was a coveted role back in the day. This was a coveted role in ancient times. You would grow up in a temple and be educated as a priestess from a very young age. And you could be a man or a woman. It doesn't matter what you identified as. You could serve the goddess in the temples. It doesn't mean that you necessarily lived in the temples. Some priestesses did, but most people would have been educated to become a priestess. And this would have included education of all sorts of things that we don't learn about today. And the one thing that I think it's kind of hard for us sometimes to wrap our head around in the world that we live in now is that the amount of respect that priestesses received. Because today in our world, we don't really see forms of sacred leadership. Unfortunately, it's very rare. And you can think about it this way. How much love do our world leaders have? Most people aren't really in deep support of them, right? We know that there's heavy corruption in our government systems, pretty much no matter what country you live in. We know that there's a lot of kind of shady stuff going on, and it's not the divinity that used to live within these sorts of roles. And so it's hard for us sometimes to wrap our head around the respect that a divine leader would have. And so priestesses weren't necessarily these divine leaders, they were serving the divine leader. So I mentioned a few moments ago that the priestesses served the goddess, right? They were the physical representation, the embodiment of the goddess, and they were serving her. Now, in these times, so let's just look at Egyptian temples. First of all, that's what I'm most familiar with, but also this is just what's wanting to come through right now. So in the Egyptian temples, the pharaoh was seen as being birthed through the goddess. So, you know, a mother, sort of similar to Mother Mary, a human would be birthing a divine being, essentially, that was hand selected for that role. So also similar to like the Dalai Lama, right? When the Dalai Lama is born, it's known many times before he's actually born that he's going to be the incarnate, or when he's born at least. He's born for this very specific role. This is also why in Egyptian culture specifically, there would be a lot of interbreeding to keep bloodlines, or to keep these divine lineages in the roles of the king. Also, this is to make sure that basically the person in leadership is the most spiritually consciously advanced person really in the civilization, that they're the most qualified to hold, what is the word I'm looking for? To hold harmony and balance for the civilization. So the priestesses, while they were devoted to the goddess, they were also devoted to the divine king. This is particularly also in Hathor and Isis timelines. So they were devoted to the divine king, stewarding the life of this leader who was really in charge of the fertility of the land. This is also something that I'll go deeper into in the Priestess Returns, because there's a whole lot that we can learn about the fertility rites that really, from what I've learned and studied and remember, are involved in every single culture that worked with the goddess, which was pretty much all of us before the patriarchy. You can see this through so many forms of artifacts that have been found, cave drawings and things like that, where the goddess is born. And I forget exactly what the depiction of her is called, but basically it's, I'm not going to do it right here, but it's legs out. It's like womb out. So now today we would see that as being, oh, that's a very unladylike position, right? And there's been a lot of things that have turned backwards. So the fall of the priestess, this is the way that I was just depicting priestesses, seen as royalty, highly respected. You would go to the temples to receive healing if you were really, depending on the temple that you were in. Usually you would have to be of noble birth, but these priestesses were seen as royalty almost. They were seen as queens. They were treated in such a way. They were highly taken care of. They had everything that they needed. They were provided high salaries, and you know, back in the day you wouldn't have called it that, but they were taken care of. And over time, slowly, as the patriarchy started to flood in and take over more control and power in the civilizations of the time, their power lessened and lessened and lessened. Now, this happened across the entire scope of the feminine energy, with men as well. But as the feminine energy was removed and the patriarchy started to gain more power, the priestesses lost prestige, they lost respect, they started to be disrespected. Like I just said, this also was happening to the general, like women in general. And a lot of this was happening as the Catholic Church was taking over. So I don't want you to get too caught up with like, if me talking about the church like triggers you, I want you to remember that 2,000 years ago, the church was a whole different thing. Really, 3,000 years ago was a whole different embodiment of what we see today. But today, there's still a lot of questionable stuff going on. But back in this time, it was totally different. So where do I want to go with this? Because I can go in about 100 directions. Okay, this is a good time for a segue. So a perfect example of this is to look at particular words that were used back then and utilized in text that we have a completely different understanding of today. So perfect example, Mary Magdalene was called a prostitute. So today, well, let me back up a second. So in 591 AD, Pope Gregory declared that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, even though she for sure wasn't a prostitute in today's language. The question is, in 591, what did they think prostitute meant? In Mary Magdalene's time, a prostitute meant a devotee of the goddess. So yeah, she was a sacred prostitute. She was also a sinner. A sinner meant someone who walks the left-hand path, which is the feminine path, goddess path. Sinner also means one who worships the moon, one who works with the cycles of the moon. Well, that was pretty much everyone pre-patriarchy. And so when we see these sorts of words used, like the church saying like, essentially you don't want to be a sinner. Well, today that means something different than what it meant back then. Back then it meant you don't want to be someone who worships the moon. Today we have a whole different correlation. Now the question is, was that deliberate? I think it was. Or was that just a mistranslation over time that had dire results? And it's probably a mixture of the two, but we see this with a lot of different words. So another example of this is the word whore. Whore, when you look at it and the different, I think it's called etymologies, like the pieces of the words from different cultures and lineages, basically in all of ancient language, the root word H-U-R, whore, means the great womb. It means the cosmic womb. It means the depth, the sacred cave. And so when you look at religion and spirituality pre-patriarchy, the womb was religion. So we might think of that meaning like church and state, like the church the Pope has a military. Like that's not the same thing. The womb was religion. What does that mean? That means that the feminine was sacred, that women were seen as sacred. And when the patriarchy started to take over, priestesses started to lose their power, their respect, their royalty status, really, and they started to be abused, just as all women were. But the priestesses had a further fall than most women because they were really held up on a pedestal. So this very silly example came in, but you guys know I always use Beyonce as an example. So it's sort of like if Beyonce had to go work at like a flea market. She's seen as literally the queen bee, right? And it's like she's the most talented. You might not agree with this, but most people, I think that she's one of the most talented people in the industry. She is not comparable. No one can compete with her record sales, with how she is viewed in society, with her reputation. That's sort of how the priestesses were. And so imagine Beyonce working at a flea market, how much that would damage her self-confidence. This is just very surface level stuff, by the way. How much that would damage how she sees herself, how she feels about herself. But then we're also adding on, there was immense abuse that started to occur against all women, but also priestesses. And so, whereas beforehand, people would be coming to the temple for healings. And you can also compare this to strippers today. If you go to a strip club, there's a lot of dark energy floating around in there today because it's not seen as a holy place. People are going there with all of their wounding and just like spreading it everywhere. And I'm not saying that to be judgmental, but that's the truth of most strip clubs. There might be some that are operating with a different energy, but most of them, if you're going into them, you need to protect yourself energetically. And the dancers are not seen. Some dancers are different, and I know some dancers who are operating with very high consciousness and they're spreading erotic love to the people that they're seeing. That's just not the case in the vast majority of cases. So priestesses may have been doing some of this work, right? They may have been doing some sexual healing, which may or may not involve sexual acts. It could also just involve being in mastery around your energy and moving sexual energy in people's bodies to create healing. But there was erotic entertainment going on. But this is a good comparison that when men or the pharaoh would be watching a woman dance erotically, there was a great respect. There was a deep reverence. It wasn't this objectification of the body. It was seen as a sacred act, not as something to be an escape or to escape from your wife who's being annoying, or like very, very different energies. And so I'm not saying that to shame or demonize anything today that goes on. It's just a perfect example of how this energy has been desecrated. It has nothing to do with the individuals participating in that. But we can see how the sacredness has been removed. And that's because the feminine energy has been removed from our society. And it's starting to come back, but we have a long way to go. So going back to what I was saying about, prostitution started to happen in the temples. And again, I'm utilizing the word more so as it means today. And so sexual energy started to be corrupted in the temples. Priestesses started doing sexual healing that was known as taking the war out of men. There was a lot of war and conquest going on at this time. This is like particularly in the temples of Isis, that time frame, so like 2000 to 4000 BC. And women started to actually take on the trauma of men, and because also this was happening in such rapid amounts, because there was this abuse starting to take place. The women were seen as like, oh, they are your healers, they can hold it, rather than, oh, they're the sacred vessel, go to them for your healing. So there's a lot also to be said about this that I'm not going to go into right now, but we start to see the work of the priestesses being a little bit more demeaned, them starting to be controlled more by the male leadership at the time, and the sacredness slowly being removed, basically the feminine starting to be removed. And you can see this from, especially in Egypt, it's very clear. Goddess Hathor was worshipped by herself. She was consorted with Ra, but she wasn't really talked about very much in relationship to Ra. The next time frame, 2000 to 4000 BC, Isis becomes the one who is more worshipped, but she's always seen in relation to a man. Isis had incredible skills with healing and magic and so many other things, but she's seen as the divine mother or the divine wife, the divine beloved, really. And so she's always really seen and sitting next to either her son Horus or her divine love, Osiris. And so then it's like, okay, the masculine and the feminine is being represented. Then it just turned into the masculine, and where did the feminine go? So you can see that this is a very large topic, and so it's really challenging to just fit it in like a 30-minute YouTube video, everything that occurred. And again, so much of this is a mystery, but the truth is that so many of us who are priestesses, whether you're just attracted to that role and you don't know why, because it's probably awakening in you, or like me, you're like, I'm a priestess, I've been this in multiple lineages and multiple lifetimes, I know it in my soul. You may have memories of those times start to come forward, and please prepare yourself for that. Because at a certain point, all the goddess temples were demolished and destroyed. And then at another point in time, everyone who was operating through the mother was killed. You know how in movies, like, there will be scenes where men on horses come into villages and they kill everybody, they destroy the whole village? That's because that happened. That literally is the patriarchy coming in and destroying the communities that would not convert either to Christianity, that was like later, like medieval times, or that wouldn't convert to worshiping a specific god. The same thing happened in the priestess temples, the same thing happened with witches, the same thing. Eventually, everything became so corrupted that if people did not agree with the church, they would be killed, and they would be called heretics. And they would be labeled a lot of different things, but usually what it meant was they had an opposing idea that challenged the church. So I have memories of, I'm not going to share them all here, but I have memories of the goddess temples burning, and me seeing my friends and my sisters and the space that you spend your whole life in, doing all of your deep work in a holy space that is the home of the goddess, all of your work being destroyed. It's a known fact that in Alexandria, the great library was burnt that housed, a lot of scrolls, I don't know the number, but all of these scrolls of ancient wisdom, all destroyed. And these are sources of information that held incredible wealths of knowledge. And I've talked about before that, our culture now makes it seem like all these timelines were really primitive, like they were all cavemen. That's not true. They were incredibly intelligent. They had so much knowledge and wisdom. I believe a lot more than we actually have today. That's another conversation. If you want to learn more about that, watch the Return to Goddess masterclass. I'll put the link for all the masterclasses. They're all free that you can download in the comments below. And I'll also put the link to Priestess Returns if you want to go deeper into this course, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're going to be moving deeper into the wounding and also the healing and activation of these priestess lineages. So there's a lot of trauma here. There's a lot of trauma and a lot of wounding. And the later forms of this you can see throughout the witch trials. So here in the United States, we actually had a very small experience of this. I believe only in quotes, like 300 or 350 people were nobody was burnt at the stake here. That wasn't allowed under English rule. But people were drowned, hung, tortured. You know, I'm going to actually be leading a whole class. I'm not sure how I'm going to structure it yet, but I'm going to be leading a great teaching about this and what happened. But really, most of this happened in Europe over 500 years in the Inquisition. And this is where we can see this literally in the last 500 years, where the people who held remnants of having knowledge about the goddess or knowing about this ancient wisdom were killed off. And so for most of us, some of you guys watching this may be very lucky and this doesn't apply to you. For most of us, like, for example, I'll just speak for myself. My lineage is mostly Celtic, but also there's some Aruba in there with West African ancestry and Jamaican ancestry, but most of my lineage is Celtic. And so when I look at that bloodline, me and my sister have talked about this before, like someone in the bloodline, because we both, our whole side on my dad's side has oracular gifts. We all have the gifts of sight and we all use it to a varying amount, but someone in our lineage said, it's not safe for me to continue to share this information. I can die for this. And my children could die for this if they know that ginger helps heal your digestive system, or that spearmint might be good for headaches. Someone in the line said, no, I'm not going to share this information anymore because it's not safe. And so what happened with actually the goddess lineages, going back further, these lines of priestesses and these lines of these cultural lines that continued to worship the goddess, it had to go underground. It had to be hidden and kept very secret, because otherwise they would have been killed for it. And so the priestess lines, when I talk about the great fall of the priestess, it's basically going from a space of royalty, falling down to a space of just for existing. They're hunted, they're killed, they're tortured, they're abused. And this, of course, also happened to women everywhere, basically. But for the priestesses, there was this specific sort of that's not the right word. What's the word I want to use? There's this sort of energy that's feels like, I want to just say like extra traumatizing. That's not very an educated word to use, but it's such a great fall. It's such a great fall. And so many of us are still operating with trauma from this. We don't want to share our gifts because we're afraid that we're going to be hunted down and killed for it. We don't want to get close with women because we're afraid this is more witch woundy, that we can't trust them. Or that the pain of losing that was so great that we don't ever want to let anyone in close again because the last time we were so distraught. And so there's so much more trauma too that can exist from these timelines. And so essentially I started working with Mary Magdalene several years ago, but this year I did a class for Mary Magdalene's feast day. I wanted to teach about her, and you can also find that on my masterclasses page in the link that it's in the comments. And after the class, or as I was preparing for it, I was just channeling Mary Magdalene as I was creating it. And she's really the one who initiated me into the temples of Isis. That was the first temple that I was really initiated into. And also the temples of Sekhmet. But she was sharing with me, like, you need to share me as a high priestess because not enough people know me as the high priestess. And so I just started jotting down all this stuff really fast, and she gave me the 4 faces of Magdalene as the priestess. And Magdalene isn't just her. Magdalene is a title. Magdalene has been a title of many women. And it also means the great, essentially the magical portal, the doorway, the womb, a woman of spiritual authority. So she wanted me to share the 4 faces of the Magdalene as a high priestess to do 3 things: to clear what we've experienced and to heal it, and also to activate us in these same faces. So here's the 4 faces. And by the way, these come from Mary Magdalene herself through me. I've done so much study and research, you guys. I've never seen these anywhere else. So just know that this comes directly from Mary Magdalene. It wasn't my idea. Okay, so the first is just the role of the priestess in general, owning that archetype within yourself and what that really means, and then also the specific wounding that is associated with that. Then, so basically each of these phases is going to be structured as a module in the course, The Priestess Returns. So the second module, we're going to be moving into the Magdalene as the heart healer. So the role of the expansive heart, of the forgiving heart, the loving heart, but really the ecstasy that lives within the heart, and how we can do extensive major healing through that energy. Then we're going to be moving in week 3 into the sexual priestess. So this is really about liberation. We're also going to be talking a lot about the body. We're going to be talking about the womb wisdom. There is so much we're going to go through in this week. Like, you're going to have to revisit it because there's a lot that we're going to talk about in relation to that. Then the last week, we're going to be going into the face of the sovereign queen. And so this is really in relation to how we steward power as a divine leader. Because as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we don't really have very many examples of sacred leadership. So how do we steward divine power? And also, how do we steward wealth in a way that supports humanity, that's for everyone's highest good, and in a way where we get to use our gifts? So this course is going to start out with these 4 weeks. She told me to start small. So we're starting with 4 weeks, but it's going to be 4 weeks that are packed. So basically in this course, we're going to have 4 modules that come out over 4 weeks. Every weekend, we're going to have a group call that's going to have another teaching related to the module, which will be released on Mondays. And in this group call, I'm also going to be doing an Akashic Records activation for deeper healing. So this is going to be just a month of really powerful clearing and activating for you. And it's something that you can continue to come back to and revisit. And here's the extra cool part about this. So I was told to create this the first time as just a 4-week experience. Now I've been told this is going to be something much bigger because, as you can see, there's so much we can fit into this. So it's going to be longer next year, and it will keep probably growing, as this is definitely something that I want to be one of my signature courses. So every year when I run it, if you have already joined a previous year, you're going to get a massive discount. You can rejoin it and get all of the new group calls, get any new information or like things that I add in, anything that I change, you'll have complete access to. And you can join again at a like significant discount that, trust me, like you'll want to join again, because these are areas of healing that we heal layer by layer. As you know, we heal everything layer by layer, right? So, but particularly with the priestess wounds and the things that we're healing in this area, these are the wounds that society as a whole has been most traumatized in. We've been most suppressed and repressed in these areas. These are the areas that have been the most demonized, and the areas where we have the most just like stuff to clear out. So you're going to come in, for example, the first round and do some cleanup on one area of your life, or one of the modules is just really going to speak to you, or you'll do sort of like a surface layer cleaning. When you come back, you're going to get something totally new. Also, as a year passes, you would have integrated that, you'd have learned more, and you would be open and ready for a new teaching from the same material. There's going to be so much for you to go into in this space. So I invite you into the Priestess Returns. We actually start, the first module releases this Monday. I believe that's August 16th. August 15th enrollment closes. So join by Sunday if you want to join this first live round, get access to the current pricing. And yeah, I'm so excited for this journey together. It's going to be so powerful. And thank you just for watching this video and still being here. And if you enjoyed it, please, just to support me, this would mean a lot to me. If you can like the video, if you can comment and just let me know how this video resonated with you, what your thoughts are, if you like what you would like to share in response to this. I would really truly love to hear. And then subscribe to my channel if you want more videos like this. All of my videos are about bringing ancient wisdom back into our modern world and utilizing your gifts. Many of them a lot of this work I do is related to creating money, utilizing your gifts and becoming attuned with your soul mission so that you get to use your gifts so that you get to cultivate a life where you get to have your desires, and you get to be a steward of that supports the planet, that is for the highest good of all, including yourself. That was very important to me, and I've cultivated my life in that way. So I teach a lot about that, but also I'm very interested in learning and teaching about ancient feminine wisdom from the past as well. So you'll get a lot of stuff like that if you want to subscribe to the channel. But anyways, thank you so much for being here. I hope that this supported you, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your night. Bye, you guys.